Welcome back. I'm Connie Sokol, your host, and I am delighted today to have a fabulous guest. So thrilled today to have with us Ganel-Lyn Condie. Hi, thanks so much for joining us today.
So great to see you in Zoom land.
I know, isn't it great? Even with all the turbulence in the world, we can still connect. Who knew that we would appreciate technology so much when I have this love-hate relationship with it, right?
Right.
I'm so thrilled for you to get to know Ganel-Lyn. And if you aren't as familiar with her kind of official background, this woman is amazing. She's a best-selling author. She's a motivational speaker, very popular with especially the youth of being able to tackle the tough stuff that we're dealing with every day and do it in a way that is authentic. So in this Get Real series that we're doing, we are tackling the tough stuff and those things that need to be talked about and how we can move forward. And so one of the beautiful things that I love is that today we're going to be talking about those things that are difficult, those things that are the tough things, but we're going to talk about coping skills for whatever those general things might be that don't feel general, that feel really personal. And then we're going to funnel it down to specifically about suicide prevention. And the reason we're going to do that is that Ganel-Lyn has dealt with a lot of different things. She's healed from a chronic illness. She is what she calls the mother of two miracle children. And she also has gone through the heartbreaking suicide of her 4-year-old sister, which led her in a positive vein to become an advocate for suicide prevention and has done so much good all around the world. So with that introduction, let's talk turkey today about, we've had a year. We're all talking about like, it's just one hit after another. I remember being in Hawaii and we were in the waves and it seemed like you just got able to stand with your wobbly knees after being hit by a wave. You'd stand and then all of a sudden, boom, second wave would come and then another and then another. So we're getting these waves. Tell me what you are seeing as far as you talk with people. What are some of the biggest challenges that they are dealing with, aside from the fact that we've got COVID-19 and we have the social unrest and we have the earthquake we had, all of these things. What are some of the challenges that are coming off of that for people personally and mentally and emotionally?
So I appreciate this platform and the opportunity to, any chance I have to talk with you is a gift in my life. But I will say that since March, since the official unleashing of the pandemic, the friends of mine that are very skill-based, that have done a lot of their internal work, have done a lot of creation in content, or mental health professionals have all been pushed to the brink, right? So the people that have been intentional about their lives, about their healing, about processing old trauma have been pushed, and I'm right there. So I'm going to tell you the last 2 weeks specifically, I was praying and pondering this morning for this conversation. I've been in a really new vulnerable space the last week, on top of rapid fire, like you said, on the waves, of everything else playing out in the news. Politics are intense, race relations are intense. Our families have had to pivot from an economic standpoint. Everyone's kind of on top of each other. All of the summer plans that are rebooting and refueling have been stripped away. And so I have found myself digging to new places. And I'm going to tell you, Connie, stuff that I had gone to therapy about, that I had processed, that I had worked through. I felt like in the middle of March, when the pandemic officially hit, for most of North America, all those issues showed up on my doorstep. They were all right back. I was like, wait, we said goodbye to each other. I sent you packing. You're all showing back up. And I've had to really wrestle with that vulnerability. And I know that authenticity and vulnerability is a lot of what you talk about and what I talk about, and is the buzzwords of the last couple of years, thanks to Brene Brown. I think she's really framed that conversation. But it's great to talk about it on a podcast. I write books. It's great to write about it. I host a new video series called The Middle. It's another thing to live it. And I found myself reaching out last night in the middle of some really vulnerable, dark feelings. And so I'm going to just say, on leading out, no matter what the middle is. So this new show I'm hosting is unpacking the fact that we don't have the end chapter with the little bow where we're like, and then they lived happily ever after. Most of us are in the middle of living a middle. And I like to analogize that it's like a wilderness experience where, if you're a Bible reader, the children of Israel were 40 years and they got manna every day, right? And yet they wandered, and really for square mileage, they didn't need to wander that long. They got to the promised land. It was only a few miles from where they started.
Yes.
And I feel that. I feel like the last few months I've been wandering in the same 2-mile radius of the same old trauma, the same junk in my life that has resurfaced. And I've had to really take a hard look at what the gifts have been during this, but that really be self-compassionate that all of us are weary. And so this kind of platform where we're having these kinds of conversations, I would just say I've been having them with the best of the best, with the most skilled, with the most inspiring. My mentors have been pushed to the point of like hibernation or numbing because they're not sure how to navigate. So I say out of the box, empathy comes from a place of like, I may not be living your life, but really we are having a global experience. And I think in one way, that's the gift of all of this, is that there's no one walking around like, I don't know why you're stressed, you guys.
Yes.
Everything's all fine on my island. Well, I want to go to that island because there's not an island that hasn't been hit.
Yes, and I love that you bring that up. I've had conversations with others about that same thing. What a gift, again, not being Pollyanna, but what a gift that globally we are experiencing this, because there is so much more understanding on such a global level that you say something or like, we just can't make it to that thing, or, oh, I can't, I'm kind of shut down right now. And people get it. I have felt the same thing. I have never laid in my bed and just laid there to process and let it wash over me like I have right now, where you just feel this, I'm maxed out. I really need some self-care right now because I can't function like I used to. Now, I think, again, acknowledging that I love the things that you brought up where, you know, the families and the finances and besides all the global unrest in the nation, and then it comes down to the community and we can't connect like we used to. And even our traditions, July 4th weekend, even our traditions have been upheaved, right? So everything is, I call it the snow globe effect, and everything's been shaken up and we're kind of sifting and letting it kind of come back to the ground. And what's that going to look like, right? So I think what's important is I'm hearing from others of like, what do I do? How do I handle this? I know for me, it's been giving myself permission to handle it differently, to not go into A plus B equals C mode, or, well, I'm going to make a list, or I'm going to go and do, like, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I'm going to go to the temple. That's not available. So I'm now having to add to my toolbox, my life toolbox of how am I going to handle this, and what feels peaceful, what gives me peace, what gives me enduring joy, what gives me the feeling that I am familiar with, even if it's in a different way. So on that kind of a vein, whether someone's dealing with illness, whether they're dealing with financial things, what are some coping skills that you think these are go-tos, people? And even if they're new, or even if they're old standbys, but maybe doing it in a new way, what are some of those coping skills that you feel like these need to be in our toolbox in order for us to even get through this? Any thoughts on that?
Yes, and I talk about the toolboxes as well, especially with suicide prevention work. I advocate for the fact that if your refrigerator broke and you went to your toolbox and the screwdriver doesn't fit, I don't know a lot about fixing appliances, so please don't think that I'm an expert on that. But I would go back to the toolbox. I wouldn't just say, oh, we're never opening the fridge again. And so I think this global experience has been an experience for me to sift through and reorganize that toolbox. Some of the tools, like you mentioned, I share the same faith identity as you do, have been removed just because of the pandemic. And I think that's why I'm seeing higher divorce rates, higher suicides. I'm seeing addiction levels skyrocket again. I'm seeing depression, anxiety in people, and even in myself, that I haven't seen at levels like this before. And it's because some of my social circles have changed, right? The things that I do as a writer is very private, but my speaking life, it was this yin and yang in my soul, and that was removed. And I was doing a lot of sitting at my desk like this with my little same old background here, trying to share messages via Zoom, which is great, but it's not the same energy exchange. Yes. And so I've had to go to a place of an awareness on trying to put names on things that I hadn't had to name before. So new categories of vulnerability, thus requiring new toolboxes. And I'm going to be honest with you, Connie, I have realized how many I had set aside that I needed to pick back up, old standbys like journaling and meditation. Those two, I was using them, but I was using them kind of as a drive-through method, and I needed to switch over to a 5-6 course meal method on both of those tools. And I'm still working on that, because the other part of this experience since March for us, as I've jokingly said, I did a meme on my social media accounts of, it's Christmas break meets summer break meets zombie apocalypse, right?
Exactly.
So,
plus end of school in there. Yeah.
plus end of school, and I had a college student that then decided to use our Wi-Fi and not be around roommates to do his job. So he had moved out but came back every day. And then my 16-year-old, and then my husband, who's a CFO, trying to keep a company together. Like, we were all experiencing these vulnerabilities. And so I had to use old tools, but in a more intentional, intense way. So I did do a meditation practice for 21 days with some friends, just to kind of up my game on that. I noticed that I have had to be very intentional about moving my body and not go into comparisons about everyone training for marathons or learning to bake sourdough bread during the COVID thing.
Right, right.
I did not learn how to bake anything. You know, I did organize my spice rack, and I thought that that would signal to the universe that we were done with the pandemic, but it didn't help. You know, and I've also had to realize that some of the tools that I've seen are the fact that I've had to say goodbye to comforts that I once had. And I've had to mourn the loss of some relationships that aren't sustained during this time. And that's allowed me to pivot to new connections, or reevaluating where I let some relationships drop. So I would invite your listeners to really look at, you know, I've gone through some chronic illness and long-term chemotherapy, and I remember through infertility, through that, through even the death of my sister, that there were certain associations that became close friends, and close friends that became associations. And that's I've had to mourn some of that shift in my support tribe. It's changed a little. And I've noticed my tribe members, they were, I don't know how you were, but for a while, the first few weeks of this, it was like, well, we can't call each other because the virus was going to go through Zoom or Marco Polo or some of the connection tools I use. And we both, you know, multiple conversations, both of us would connect and go, why have we been isolating? And it was because we were trying to get our sea legs.
Yes.
Like, how do we meet the needs of our family? We were going through cereal and chips, like no one's business around here. I was like, who knew that our family needs more chips and more cold cereal than anything else, and rubbing alcohol? Like, I didn't realize that those were like needs in the toolbox, right? And so I'm trying to manage. I've always worked from home and kind of had that juggle, but it was a new juggle. And
Yes.
my friends that have done it, they were juggling it, so they weren't available. So I would say, look at your toolbox. And just like when I clean out the toolbox, literally in the garage, once a year I do this, I'm like, why do we need this? This isn't, I don't even know what this is for anymore. I've done that. There's been some things like, you know what? I'm going to have to honor what you did for me for a season, but it's not working. Mm-hmm. And then I've also pulled out tools and thought, okay, maybe I should Google this. Oh, this is really helpful. I haven't been using it like I could use it. So I would say, look at the things that you know work for you and stay off social media. And I'm going to say, I preach this and then I get snagged by this, because that's the platform that I share my messages, right? Mm-hmm. So that's my workspace. But if I'm not careful, I'm scrolling, and I'm consuming large amounts of news that I wasn't previously doing, and those aren't healthy for me. So I'm going to say to you that, like, there's a large amount of scarcity on multiple fronts. And if I'm not careful, I look at Connie Sokol. She's rocking the pandemic. She's pivoted in her career. Her kids look like they're thriving. And the Condie family looks like, you know, we're hanging on by little threads. At any moment, a large wind is going to burst them. My career will be out the door. My health will be out the door. My relationships will be out the door. That's really the thinking I have to watch. And scarcity has been easy So easy. And social media, as much as I think it allows connection and inspiration, it can feed that fire of scarcity. And so I have a dear friend that we both share, and I texted her late in the night, and she preached back to me the stuff I share. And so I would say, make sure your faith friends or your tribe, that you're honest with at least two people. And that's because that's not fair to be one person, right? Two people, I think, as a minimum of your tribe, to say, hey, listen, I'm in scarcity. I'm not trusting people right now. I know the stories in my head are not super clear right now. And I just want you to know that I'm not even sure what to share. And that's where I'm at. That's enough. I think journaling, in-depth meditation, off social media, reevaluate tools that weren't serving you and honor them and say goodbye. And then look at your tribe, and don't over emphasize how many need to be in that group. That's a very small list for me of people that I show up in this vulnerable space, and know that everyone's doing the best they can. You know, I can go into scarcity about my relationships, like, well, people are busy and they don't have time, or my spouse, he's trying to keep a company going, he can't meet my needs the way, and that's all true. And so generous assumptions that everyone's doing the best they can, and it's messy right now. You know, I don't think the end of this story is even close on the horizon for any of us. I think we are in a very important sifting time, but on every circle in your life, right? Like for me, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, and professionally. And you know what? None of those areas, Connie, I'm going to be super honest with you, because I hear from a lot of people that they think I'm rocking my life. You know, and I try to be pretty authentic in interviews, on my shows I host, on my social media platforms. You know what? Yes, there's parts of my life that I will consistently get up and show up. But I'm not rocking anything right now. I'm in investigation. I'm trying to stay curious. I'm trying to observe myself. I'm trying to give myself compassion and say, hey, listen, I don't have answers on this. And I'm trying to be really aware of the stories in my head, because the stories in my head right now, they can shut me down in 4 seconds. I had someone reach out yesterday, Fulbright scholar, very educated, very intelligent. And the praise he gave me, I was like, who are you talking to? I don't even know who you're talking to. Why are you talking to me so kindly right now? Because I could tell that the stories in my head have not been kind. And so I would just say that toolbox deserves a reorganization and a little editing, and then find the ones that are, you know, really working for you and use them double. Because, you know, I can't afford to not see the sunshine or move my body or say my prayers. Like, I just can't afford it right now. Maybe I could have skated by a year ago on a day here and there where, you know, I didn't connect with people, or I didn't take care of my spirit or my brain, but I can't do that anymore.
I agree. I think it is a beautiful time, honestly, this opposite in all things, to be able to do that, like you called that sifting, that reevaluation, this global sort of hard stop, which is a beautiful thing to stop and go, okay, kind of like you said, evaluating each tool, evaluating each thing, and how much do I need? And I love the point that you made, doing it more. I talked to a friend of mine, she's also a therapist, and we were talking about, you know, I said, you know, I'm doing all these things that I feel like they've always been helpful for me. And as she went through with me, she said, Connie, you just need to do it more. You're doing a little bit of yoga, you're doing a little bit of this, but you need to do it more. That's the situation calls for that. And it woke me up, because I thought, oh, maybe I'm just taking this too, you know, intensely. But I went, wait a second. No. Listing off all the things we're dealing with, it's an intense time. It's any time to be more self-care, more compassionate, more empathetic, more of that. It is now. I love, for those that are just joining us, we're going to be wrapping up in just a few minutes, but I wanted to kind of go through a few things that Ganel-Lyn had said of looking for the gift. She said, you know, we're weary right now. So that empathy for self and for others, which I think is so huge, that give yourself some slack. We're all enduring. We're all getting up and breathing in the morning, and our children are alive. Okay, we're doing a good job. So pat yourself on the back. Yay. If we have cold cereal for dinner, great. We've got milk in the house.
Yes.
Great. We have cold cereal and food storage, right? And I love this idea with the toolbox, going through and evaluating and seeing what those look like. I love this idea of just, we need to get used to doing it differently. And if we need to take time off, take time off. I know I just told my assistant and the people that I work with, I'm like, July, we're taking off. We're just getting recentered. We're just taking it off. And I'm laying in the bed, just relaxing, reading, getting that opposite in all things and giving ourselves that, not feeling like we got to be a cruise director all summer. And then the traditions of creating new ones, this meditation, movement. I love the phrase you say of generous assumptions for yourself and for others. And then, of course, allowing yourself that grieving process of what you thought would be and what was, instead of now what is. And that's okay to be, get the boom chicka pop out and go a few tears and say, what the stinking hey, I was thinking we were going to be on a cruise right now and we're not.
Listen, and I think that can't be overemphasized enough. I am comfortable allowing space for Connie to grieve or this person to grieve, but I have a struggle, you would think, with some of the grief I've practiced in my life, to really let the sadness wash over me. And we've had loss on multiple levels as a global community, individually as families. And I think it can't be overestimated enough how important it is to allow ourselves that space, whatever that looks like. I was talking to a friend that's of color about the race relationships that are playing out on social media and in the news right now. And it's interesting to know, when will we know we've grieved enough so we can move into the healing? And I always want to, after the suicide death of my sister 6 years ago, I got through that first year. And then when I looked back, I realized I wanted to rush it. I rushed it a bit. My first book had come out. I was already speaking. I had some media outlets that I was a regular contributor to. And those things kept me alive. They were very purposeful. But I realized that it wasn't until year 2 and 3 and even 4 that I hadn't given myself permission to have the space to be messy. And we want the checklist. Like, I wanted to do the steps of grief. And I think there's no handbook for how to do the pandemic on top of an earthquake, on top of, we just had local fires that played out on CNN, on top of, race rioting and a political season. Like, there's no handbook for that. There's no handbook. I tell teenagers, I've been speaking to a lot of college groups. I tell those college groups, you're the future leaders. The leaders right now have no muscle memory for what we're doing. So I've invited them to journal, to get curious and watch, because they will have the muscle memory for what's to come in the future. They'll be able to pivot much faster than we've been able to do. And so I've really been aware that giving permission for grief, and I have to find a friend to reflect that back to me. I don't do that well internally on my own. I have to have certain friends that I say, I know I need to cry, but unless I start to verbalize it, and I can't just talk to myself, that's not working for me. Can I just speak out the words and see what comes up? Speaking of new traditions and suicide prevention, 4th of July is my 22-year-old son's favorite holiday above Christmas. And so it was a very strange year for us, where we live here locally along the Wasatch Front in Utah. There's a very big, I think it's one of the largest, if not largest, 4th of July parades. It didn't happen. And I've still bought the matching t-shirts from Old Navy, and we never got a picture all together because we weren't really together, because he lives with roommates in another, close by. And we met on the Provo River, and we were supposed to be on the river within a certain period of time. It took 2 hours because it was a madhouse. We get on the river, and I find a broken oar as we're getting on the river, and I picked it up, and my kids were making fun of me. And as we would come together, and then we get split up, and then one of us would get caught in the, shore with the branches. And I had this broken oar. Connie, it's going to make me cry. I just kept using it, right? And it was ridiculous, right? We laughed. We were singing Christmas carols at one point. Nothing looked like it ever had before. And the river was filled with people trying to do the same thing. And that broken oar, I just kept using it the best I could. And finally, my 22-year-old, who thinks he's smarter than me most of the time, said, "Hey, can I borrow that?" Or I said, "You've been mocking it this whole time." And I thought it was so symbolic for me to see that there were moments where we were just rushing down the river and it was so fun. And there were moments we were very united as a family. We were this little pod of 4 tubes, and then 2 broke off and 1 went ahead. And then there were moments I'm using my broken tool that is like not even intended for it. And I had joked that I was going to take it home because someone had thrown it away. I put it back in the pile of oars for people to use because it had been so helpful. And everyone kept saying, "That's the perfect size." And I thought, you know what, so often what we have presented to us in our lives, as I watched my sister navigate 40 years of depression and anxiety and learning disabilities and some sexual abuse trauma, she had fought through and had lots of tools. You know, she had good therapists, a great religious leader that met with her every week. She had friends and family. The last year of her, couple years of her life were some of her best, where she had gone back to college and moved out on her own. But she had taken a dip. And I watched a few as we went down the river, like broken rafts and broken tubes and people that had climbed out on the shore and they were, done for. And I thought a lot about my own journey and my own starts and stops and broken parts of me. And really the message around suicide prevention that I've tried to share the last 6 years, because Meg can't, is that we all have those broken oars, those parts of us that really can't be sold in REI, or Scheels, in the big Dick's Sporting Goods stores, because it's broken. But you know what? It was super useful for me. And I think it becomes a very sacred journey to, as the Japanese pottery, that meme has been passed around, that we kind of embrace those broken parts. The message around suicide is that people start to believe that broken part of them is a burden to the world and that we would be better without them. So I've tried to share the message in every form I can, as many times as I can, and I will for the rest of my life in whatever stewardship assignment God trusts me with. It might not look like podcasting and writing and speaking in the future, but I'll still talk about it, that we all have those broken parts of us. And there's all of us, our journeys down the river of life is sometimes fraught with scary moments where we get knocked off the tube, which happened, and the river was freezing, but the sun was beautiful and warm, and there were people there. And all the fishermen, I felt bad because we're all tubing and interrupting, and they kept saying, "No, the fishing's great today." I met one fisherman though, she was grumpy. She's like, "Why are you all out here?" I had met 20 fishermen that were like so happy, and the fishing was great, and we weren't disturbing it at all. And I thought, isn't that just such an analogy for mental health and how we need to really just get aware of, yes, there were moments where I thought people had the best floating devices and they were rocking their life. And then further down the river, they were the ones caught over in the low part of the river. And my little tube was perfect for getting over those rocks because I wasn't in that fancy, raft. And so I think mental health wise, we have to just start talking about it in that way, that it's a flow. And Meg got tired. And when she decided that we would be better without her, she made that choice. And I'm going to just say, through sacred experience, I know that she knew the minute she had passed that she had made a mistake. And research shows the same, because the Golden Gate Bridge, a percentage of people that try to die by suicide by jumping survive. Very small percentage. But of that percentage that survive, 90% report a joy and happiness in their life that the moment before they jump, they never thought was possible. So I would just say, stay in the tube. If you get shot out of the tube and your oar breaks, then climb back in the tube. And there were moments where, we would run into strangers, and those strangers would help us get unstuck. That is life. And it may not feel like anyone else is navigating life in such a messy way, but I'm going to say, when I say talk to teenagers, high school looks like everyone's rocking it, and you're the only one that's the awkward pimple face, not cool clothes, person not getting invited to prom. Then you grow up and realize, you go back to your reunion, everyone felt that way, you know? And so I think if anyone's listening to this, stay in your body, because we're not going to be better without you. We're not, I don't care if you have a leak in your raft or your oar is broken, then you keep floating. Someone's going to find you and help you. And if you're alone for a while, my son was in a lone moment on the river ahead of me. And all of a sudden I saw him look up. I said, what are you looking at? He said, I just have this thought. For me, it's the spirit. So the spirit said to him, look up. And he saw a bald eagle. And so then he said it to me, and I said, oh my gosh, there's a bald eagle. And then the raft behind us says, what? Where's the bald eagle? There's the bald, and it rippled. And I think podcasts like this are that. It's the moment where Connie says, hey, look up, I see, and then I say, hey, look up. And then everyone behind us, all of a sudden that river experience that day was not the parade that we normally had done,
Yes.
but it was a pivot and a joyful, connecting, imperfect experience.
Perfect, perfectly imperfect because of that. But it was new, which didn't make it bad. It was different, which didn't make it that it wasn't a good thing. It made it so that you were opened and you were expanded to how to do life differently, to adjust, and like you said, pivot. And I think if anything that we need in the coming days and years, it's that ability to pivot, to hold on to those things that are true, those relationships, those beliefs, those things, and then be able to take the situations that come, keep applying that, keep applying it. And I love that you say, just stay in the tube, just keep getting back in, because the tube is not the problem. Life is going to give us all those things. And I love the point that you bring up of people will be there to help. People will pick us up down the stream right then, because we'll do the same thing in our turn. And that's the beauty of life. That's the sharing of our journeys. And if someone isn't there, they aren't there to help us in our journey as well. We're not able to share it. Such beautiful thoughts. Ganel-Lyn, thank you so much for taking this time today. Lovely. For those that are listening, I caught you up on those other thoughts that she shared before. And really quickly, remember, she said, dealing with any challenges, faith, friends, journal, meditation, movement, all of those things. And then adding to this, adjust, pivot, give yourself that self-care, that empathy, that compassion to be able to say, wow, we're all going through tough times, and that's okay. And then in the suicide prevention, I love that. Stay in the tube and remember, remind those around you that you love them, they are loved, and they are not a burden, that they are part of our pivotal journey together, the sacred journey that we all go down the river together, giving one another the broken oars and the helping out of the branches. Love it. Ganel-Lyn, if people want more, where can they find you?
Well, listen, we didn't talk about it at the beginning, but I have the strangest name on the planet. And so what's great about that, it's not great in junior high, but when you want a website or a Twitter account or any social media platform, it's very easy because no one has it. So what I've come to say is Google knows exactly who you're looking for if you just start typing. If you just say G-A-N, if you get to that, usually Google's like, oh, that weird named person.
We know her.
I'm on all the platforms, and I love to connect there. I have the opportunity to really see this as a mission and a stewardship assignment at this time. And I'll do it as long as God wants me. And I hope he's really clear when he wants me to step aside and let others keep doing it, because it's a very sacred stewardship for me to have these conversations with amazing people like you, and to connect on these platforms where I get messages and someone picks up one of my CDs or my books, or they catch one of my video series or heard me speak. And sometimes it's months later that they say, hey, that one thing you said. And so I invite, everyone's voice is needed, because what I say may not speak to you, but the way Connie says it does. And so, yes, they can find me on my website, and that has links to all the other places.
Love it. And her books and bookstores, definitely connect and share with your family, share with friends, this fabulous information. And I love the analogies that you use. They're easy to remember so people can remember these points that we've shared. As always, for those that are listening, and I love that we so connect on this, that my calling is teaching women and families about purpose-filled living. And I love that when we all, again, find our purpose and we fulfill that as imperfectly as we do on a daily basis. Ganel-Lyn does it amazingly, but as we all do it in our own little way, and we add to the benefit and the beauty of this world, it really does make a difference. That drop in the pond really does matter. So I love that you have shared it this way. For those that want more, go to Ganel-Lyn's website. If you want to go to mine, ConnieSokol.com. As always, if you want more podcasts, subscribe right below. Would love to hear from you. TV, segments, podcasts, blog posts, and programs, and all kinds of things. Lots of wonderful freebies and challenges to help you to be able to utilize the information that we share on these podcasts and get them into your life and share them with your family. Lots of tips on there. So go to ConnieSokol.com. And as always, if you want specific things for today, go to Ganel-Lyn's website as well. We are so grateful that you took time with us today. Join us for more in the future. And thank you. And remember, take your next step today to live your purpose-filled life.